We're all about success from a peaceful mind around here. But do you have people who wind you up, who frustrate you, who make it hard for you to maintain your groundedness and equanimity? Well, that's the problem we're going to explore in this video and what we can do about it. People we experience as negative or resistant can be an impediment to our attempts to live and work from a more peaceful mind, and they can become like an unsolvable puzzle to us. Like no matter what we try, they seem committed to being contrary, disruptive, and maybe even hostile to us and what we're trying to achieve. It's not just that we didn't get off on the right foot, it's like we can't get on the right foot, ever. Robert was a service manager I knew who experienced exactly this, and there's a lot that we can learn from his story. He was on this journey of success from a peaceful mind with me, and for the most part he was successful, but he constantly locked horns with this guy called Matthew. Matthew was one of the technical managers that Robert needed to collaborate with, but Robert dreaded having to deal with him because in his mind Matthew was a guaranteed source of awkwardness and bait. Every time there'd been a service issue that Robert needed to manage, he found Matthew difficult. The thing is, we form a story about who people are in our minds. We form it from experience, yes, but only a limited experience. That story sets our expectations and becomes a lens through which we see their behaviour. In other words, if I come to think of you as a brat, I'm going to see everything you do through the lens that you are a brat. And guess what? When I see everything you do through that lens, everything you do confirms to me that you're a brat. In yet other words, my expectation shapes my experience and reinforces my expectation. If I look at you through red-tinted glasses, you're going to look red to me whether you are or aren't. And if I'm not aware that I am wearing red-tinted glasses, I'm going to think that's because you really are red. But what if my story of you isn't as accurate as I think it is? And, by the way, our stories of each other are never as accurate as we think they are. We get our story of other people wrong all the time. It means the behaviour I see might not mean what I think it means, what I project that it means based on my story, based on my expectations, based on the lens through which I see you. So I asked Robert to engage in an experiment, to suspend his expectations about Matthew and see Matthew's behaviour through a different lens. Ideally through no lens at all, actually, but at least a different lens, just to see if the behaviour looks different. This kind of experiment will help us at least see other possibilities and get us out of the trap of automatically seeing every behaviour through that lens. There's an idea related to this called attribution error, and I talked to Robert about it. Attribution error basically works like this. When I do something bad, it's because of my circumstances. When you do something bad, it's because of your personality. When I do something good, it's because of my personality. When you do something good, it's because of your circumstances. In other words, when I speed, it's because I'm late to something that's important. When you speed, it's because you're a... When I help an old lady across the road, it's because I'm virtuous. When you do it, it's because you're trying to impress somebody. Now, I'm not saying that we always do this with everybody, but we tend to do it with people who we've created a difficult person story about. And it can be very useful for us to test how things look when we turn that around. What if they were speeding because they were late for something important? What if they helped the old lady across the road because they really did care? When you find yourself jumping to a conclusion about behaviour and judging, it's useful to pull yourself up and question, what if it's not really that? Now, you might be thinking, yes, but what if my person is really difficult? What if it's not just my thinking? Well, we'll get to that. Hang on. Let's just finish this bit first. You see, having created a means to get out of that circular thinking trap, I talked to Richard about 3 specific things that we can do to improve those difficult relationships. Number 1 is to invest in rapport. Rapport is a state of open, responsive communication between two people. A warmness, you might say, although it doesn't necessarily mean liking each other or agreeing with each other, just that we find it easy to get a productive dialogue going. Rapport tends to increase when we find common ground, a common interest, for example, or a common cause. And that means being willing to spend time just talking, finding out about each other, being interested, curious, and talking more when we find those common ground topics. Even in a confrontational negotiation, we can find common ground, even if that common ground is we both want to get out of this negotiation. The thing is, when you're dealing with somebody that you've found difficult, don't hurry into expecting immediate change. Be ready to just take time building rapport with them. Be ready to be patient and tenacious. Be ready to work through some discomfort. The second thing is to hear the intent behind their words over the words themselves. Because the words may be poorly chosen ones, especially if they're as ungrounded and as stressed as we might be. I don't know about you, but I don't always choose my words well. And if you search your experience, I'm sure you'll come to discover that sometimes you don't too. Why should they be any different? So look for the intent behind the words and give that intent the benefit of the doubt. If that intent has a bit of needle in it aimed towards you, consider that maybe that's because there's something going on in them, a fear, an anxiety, a stress, something that we might want to suspend our judgment about and get a little bit compassionate towards. The third thing is to tell the truth, but tell it plainly and impersonally. For instance, if I say to you, you're always late to meetings and that's terrible, I'm judging. I'm seeking to use blame and shame. And that's more likely to push that person away rather than bring them in, and to get them to push back on me. In other words, it's just going to entrench the difficulty. But when I say something like, look, I've noticed that you've been late to our meetings a few times, and the impact that has on me is it makes me feel like I'm not valued. Now, that's the truth. And as stated, it's impersonal information and sets the stage for me to make a collaborative, empowering request. Like, now you understand what impact that has on me. Would it be okay with you if we tried to turn that around? Now, let's loop back to that question you had on your minds earlier, which is, but what if they really are just out to be difficult? Well, if that's really true, and not just our expectations fulfilling themselves, then that's when it's useful for us to create a sort of psychological shield so that their behavior can be outside of our space, and inside our space we can retain our groundedness and equanimity so that we can think clearly and act clearly and be productive rather than off balance and reactive. And I show you how to do that in this video here. This is Steve, and I wish you health and happiness.